So, hello everybody, and welcome to another one of the wonderful quarterly editions of the Astrology Show that I get to do with my wonderful friend and teacher, Pam Gregory, astrologer. Hi, Pam, how are you doing?
Right, wonderful to be with you again, David. Always look forward to these, and yeah, strong energy coming in. So this is going to be wonderful, wonderful sharing. Thank you again for having me and giving me this opportunity to share with you.
Right, and of course, actually, in the past, we often used to host this show on wisdomhub.tv, but that actually now is going to come down offline after many years in service, and we're going to be hosting this particular edition on quantumplanet.world, which is our newer visionary platform, actually, for all things to do with astrology and healing and Mother Earth and many other things. So please do check out quantumplanet.world, and if you have something interesting to share, like our joint friend Randy Hatton did with his water, and we're going to be featuring him on that platform, then please do let us know, because we want to hear from everybody who's got quantum technology being downloaded into their space at the moment, because this is really what this whole process is about. So I'm hoping today, Pam, that the astrology of the upcoming equinox, which is going to be a Libra equinox, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Seems very, very opportune, because Libra is all about balance and also about making sure that the scales are balanced in, well, the right way, which would be in our favor, I guess. But what can we say about this upcoming equinox, Pam? Where would you like to start?
Yeah, so much. I just think a general point about equinoxes, which I've talked about in the past, but it's good to remind everyone because it's quite exciting, is around equinoxes, there's something that occurs called the Russell-McFerran effect.
Okay.
And it's called Russell-McFerran because those are the guys who discovered it about 75 years ago. It's been studied for about 75 years. But what happens is that around the equinoxes, particularly, the solar winds create cracks in the Earth's magnetosphere. Now, the Earth's magnetosphere has already dropped significantly over recent years, but it creates cracks. The smaller cracks can be the size of California. The bigger ones can be wider than the entire Earth.
Wow.
And that means that the Earth's magnetic fields can directly connect with the sun's magnetic fields and bring in information directly from the sun. Now, whether the ancient peoples knew this scientifically or whether they just intuited that these were times that they could download high-level information more easily, I don't know. But as we're aware, they had ceremonies around solstices. But here it's very much around the equinoxes that this Russell-McFerran effect happens. I've got a link which we could put under the video, in fact, about it.
Amazing. I think that's super interesting too, because we know that we're passing through this, the photon belt, and the light is different. And it's kind of like, you uttered the immortal words, I recall on the show some moons ago now, about it all getting a little bit rock and roll. I think that was probably sometime in 2021. And I would posit that it hasn't stopped being rock and roll ever since
Keeps on coming. It just keeps on coming. But the wonderful thing is these surges of the solar flares that are upgrading our DNA and also the photonic light. These are the key ingredients that are upgrading us, evolving us at such speed. And Tim Wilde, whose work I respect, he talks about with Sirius, it took them 300 years to ascend. For us, it's taking 20. Wow. So, and we are actually progressing extremely well energetically. So despite what you're watching on the nightly news, if you are still doing that, and I'd recommend not, we are doing incredibly well. So yeah, Libra equinox, another very powerful time with some terrific astrology actually to talk about. So shall I put the chart out, David?
Yeah, let's get into it. And, as a preface to this, it seems an eternity ago that we did the summer solstice, to be honest.
I know, lifetimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was only a few months ago, but I know that we've both talked about this quite a bit on our own shows, and you've talked about it a lot in your updates. But it does feel like, on some level, energetically, that we may have got past the worst, the tipping point. Now, it's not necessarily being reflected on the goggle box or the hallucinatory box, how we want to look at the images that are projected at us. But I do feel in the energetic realms that we have passed some big milestones. So I just want to put that out there for people who may be feeling like things aren't getting any better. If you believe the narratives, as me and Pam tell you not to, from the television, then you could still be in that place. However, I'm hoping that this equinox that Pam's going to share with us right now is going to show us that there is the energy of rebirth very much in the etheric realms right now.
Yeah, and you know, that's a good point to talk about, David, because actually I think we are on a more individual timeline than we have ever been. So for some people who are in fear, it's going to be the worst of times. For other people who can stay in love, it's going to be the best of times. And we're going to have that latitude of experience. So for many people, you know, they're in 5D right now. They're in 5D right now. Right now, they just drop into love, to joy, to peace, and they are living it right now. For other people, that might be quite a distance away, but there's going to be a lot of real progression in our evolution into 2026 for sure. I think between now and 2026, a lot of progression. And that's while Saturn's in Pisces. But let's get into this, because a lot of good stuff to talk about.
Yeah. Yay. So we crossed the first hurdle today, which is mastering the technology.
Yes, I'm on a different computer through some technology traumas. So anyway, the Libra equinox is, as we know, when the sun enters Libra. So actually, it's quite late this year. It's happening. It'll be actually 8 o'clock in the morning, UK time, British summer time, on the 23rd of September. So much to talk about here. So I'll try and be brisk but precise. So let me start with an out of sign opposition with Neptune. You know, if Neptune was just tipping into Aries here, you could see this more clearly. Actually, it's an out of sign square, isn't it? Out of sign, sorry, opposition. It's been a stressful day. Opposition with Neptune. Now, at one level, that can make us feel confused, overwhelmed. It's all too much. I can't see through the fog. There's a lot of deception. And we can always choose which level of Neptune we live at. It can be, we are birthing this next phase of our evolution in a spiritual context of unconditional love. And that's the one I would suggest focusing on. It's all about where you put your attention. The sun is also in a quincunx here, very tight quincunx with Saturn. And this is a reality check, really. How, with Saturn in Pisces, how are we putting our spiritual ideals into practice day to day? You know, are we really walking our talk and doing that? And that's a kind of a check to make sure that we are. It's also, and I mentioned this months ago in my Saturn in Pisces video, Saturn in Pisces I see as the dissolution of 3D linear time. And people are experiencing this more and more. Time slippage. Time is not as it was. We're losing density. We're losing this connection to very tight linear time. Now, we've got a beautiful couple of trines between Mercury in Virgo and the moon in Capricorn. And Mercury is also trine to Jupiter in Taurus. So all earth signs, it doesn't quite connect to an equilateral triangle here, but nevertheless, two lovely trines from Mercury. And this is about, again, grounding these new big ideas, big thinking, Jupiter, Mercury, grounding these new big ideas about finance, about currencies, about technology, about food, agriculture, food production, farming, into new systems to make them work like clockwork. And I also feel, although there's very clearly a move towards centralization of digital currencies, Uranus in Taurus, there will be many breakaways of microcurrencies. And I think that Virgo is about tiny things. I think there will be even localized microcurrencies. There will be other options. We are not all going to be herded into any centralized currency, because the direction of travel ultimately with Pluto moving into Aquarius is decentralized. So I think that's very important to keep on your radar. So we also have Chiron here at 18 of Aries in an exact trine to Venus. And Venus, by the way, is in sextile to Mars here as well. So everybody has Chiron in their birth chart somewhere. But when it's in Aries, the keywords for Aries are I am, I exist, I have a center, I am an individual. So there's a wound to the I amness, if you like. So very often in your natal birth chart, if you have Chiron in Aries, there's a sense of I don't have a right to exist. I have no feeling of center or identity, particularly in your early life. And then in the birth chart, we can track reasons why that happened in your childhood. But there's a wounding here. Now, what is wonderful here, is this trine to Venus is saying this can now be healed with love, Venus, but also by stepping into your sovereignty in a major way. Leo, stepping into your sovereignty. North Node in Aries supports that. Aries opposing this Chiron is energizing that possibility. And this is almost like the balance of the divine masculine and the divine feminine as well, the Venus Mars. But so there's big potential here for healing any sense of sickness, illness, but also woundedness around this victim consciousness of I don't have a right to exist. And it's done with love, and it's done with stepping into your sovereignty. Almost in every video, I talk about sovereignty. Now, we have this ongoing all this year of a huge T-square between Pluto and the nodal axis, which I've talked about repeatedly. So go back to previous videos. It also picks up Eris in this tight conjunction to the North Node. And it also picks up here a conjunction to Haumea, 29 of Libra. It also more widely picks up Ceres, which I know, David, you want to talk about in a little while. So this is a major choice point for humanity. And every, so many people are writing to me, contacting me, saying, my life is completely turned on its head. This is a huge choice point. I'm leaving my home. I'm leaving my marriage. I'm leaving my job of, however many years, huge turnarounds. Are we choosing love, or are we choosing fear? Are we choosing victim, or are we choosing co-creation and empowerment? So big, big, big ongoing theme. But what's lovely here is that Uranus is trine to Pluto. Now, this isn't exact, clearly, it's a few degrees off, but this is going to form 5 exact trines between 2026 and 2028 of Uranus to Pluto. And when it does that, historically, that has been incredibly positive for a flowering of creativity for people, a renaissance for humanity. So that's very positive if we're looking down the pipeline, the timeline, but it's already signaled at this Libra equinox. Now, so not only is this, all the things I've talked about already, signaling a new chapter, but what I really want to pick up now and start to bring in the KBOs, Kuiper Belt objects, is there is a, pretty close trine between the Sun at 0 of Libra, Sedna, which has an 11,400-year orbit, at 0 of Gemini, both air signs, and also they are both trine to Pluto in Capricorn. Now that's out of sign, because if it was Pluto was just tipping into Aquarius, it would be all air signs, but nevertheless, it is a grand trine in air. So these are new ideas, new initiatives. I think there's going to be a huge amount around technology, communication. And Sedna and Pluto are actually in this kind of dance. End of an earth sign, Taurus, beginning of an air sign. End of an earth sign, Capricorn, beginning of an air sign, Aquarius. They're both going to be toing and froing from now all the way into the end of 2024. And that trine continues really into 2026. So both have strong themes of, if you know the themes, Pluto is linked to Persephone, who was kidnapped, taken down to the underworld. Hades, hellish, dark, scary, cross the sticks, STXY, finally came up to the light, but it was kind of death, transformation, and rebirth. Sedna, if you heard me talk about the myth, Sedna, she was in a canoe with her father in a storm. Her father threw her overboard to save himself. When she tried to climb back in, he chopped her fingers off and she floated down to the deep. And she and her fingers transformed into beautiful sea creatures. So between Sedna and Pluto in this long-term dance, this trine until 2026, they are both very much around themes of loss, grief, betrayal in both senses, and surrender, but transformation into something really, really beautiful. Because, you know, Pluto then in the myth, you know, Persephone comes up to the light and is stronger and wiser. Also, Sedna, that will backtrack into the end of Taurus in November. Sedna in Taurus, I think, was really at this betrayal of nature. Taurus, fixed earth, nature, betrayal, pillaging, raping, polluting. And so there's been a big betrayal there, but we know that the other Kuiper Belt objects are picking up these themes and turning them around. And so, but be aware, you know, there's so much that's about loss and death, which we are absolutely, as humanity, going through right now. But the dwarf planets are singing a higher song. They're singing a higher song for humanity. They're picking up a different octave of consciousness. So, and transformation into a different state of being. So technology, AI, be very discriminating as a lot more AI comes down the road, a lot of galactic contact, which could be wonderful if the galactics wanted to wipe us out. They've had about 200,000 years to do it and they haven't done it yet. So I'd suggest they're very benevolent, and are bringing wonderful things to us. You know, they are overwhelmingly benevolent, I think. Otherwise, they would have polished us off by now. But when Sedna started to move into Gemini, it's very interesting, and you can go back and do a Google search on this. This was the time when a very senior exec of Google called Geoffrey Hinton resigned because he thought technology had gone too far. So we must be very aware and discriminating around technology and AI. You know, I'm a bumpkin. I always go with natural and organic and simple. I'm very happy in the 1800s. So big new cycles are appearing to start at this Libra equinox. One of the final big pieces I want to talk about is, I'm going through this super speedily, so hopefully we can backtrack on some of this, David, is if we look at the moon here, the moon is forming a cardinal grand cross with some of these wonderful Kuiper Belt objects. It's already in this triple conjunction here with Quawa, super close, within 33 minutes, Quawa, and Ixion at 2:14 of Capricorn. Now, Quawa in myth is always about there's a price to be paid for what has been lost. And it comes out of chaos. But Quawa in the myth, which is, you know, linked to the Tongva people who used to live around the Los Angeles basin, knew that they had to come out of chaos, but they had to raise their frequency through song and dance in community, because they knew the energy was then multiplied and magnified rather than just doing it on your own. And through song and dance, they then set their intention and manifested beautiful things. So that's Quawa. Again, it's a turning from what's been lost and chaos and awfulness into joy. Ixion, two sides to the myth. Ixion had no moral compass. He murdered his father-in-law. Zeus gave him a second chance and he tried to rape Zeus's wife. He was then tied to a spinning wheel of fire and spinning off into eternity. But the higher expression, and I see very clearly how that's playing out in society right now, but the higher expression of Ixion is he finds joy and bliss through simplicity, going his own way, away from normal society and mainstream, finding joy and bliss in simplicity. And a lot of us are already doing that. So again, it's turning from, you know, very negative into positive. They are both opposing a beautiful dwarf planet or asteroid really called Chaos, that is also on the world axis, 227 of Cancer. And in myth, this is about heaven was ripped from earth to allow demons to come in. But the purpose of chaos is to come back into wholeness, So again, we have this twist back into the good, into regeneration. They are both square to Makemake. This is linked to the Rapa Nui people, linked to the great sea spirit of Easter Island, and I've talked about this myth where the European sailors came in, they pillaged the land, they brought disease, rats got off the ship, they chopped all the trees down. At one point, there were only 111 inhabitants left on Easter Island. But again, they turned it around. They brought nature back into a stable ecosystem and abundance. They turned that whole thing around again. So it's again, yes, it's about pandemics, it's about ecological damage, it's about depopulation, all very relevant themes at the moment, but it's also about regeneration, as so many of these Kuiper Belt objects are. The final corner leg of this Cardinal Grand Cross is Salacia at 859 of Aries. Salacia, that I think is very linked to photonic light. She's linked to the sunlight and moonlight shimmering on the sea. She's liquid light, she's mermaid energy. For me, she is leading the way in embodying more light in our bodies, becoming the light body. More and more healing technologies that we already have are using light, bring more light into the body. Where we're moving forwards with medicine is light technology medicine, just like the Lemurians did, light technology medicine, because that's what we're made of frequency and light. That's what we're made of. And Salacia, I think, is leading the way forwards in that. And I think that's immensely exciting that she is part of this Cardinal Grand Cross. So, and Homer, as we know, because I've talked about it many times before, so as David, is again this regenerative principle. Nature was laid waste. She could turn it around with shamanism, with her magic stick, the Makalai, and produce wild food always in abundance. So all of the dwarf planet and Kuiper Belt objects that I've researched so far, they don't end in misery. They almost start from misery in the myth, and they end in turning it back to a sense of oneness with nature, oneness with the earth, harmony, living in right balance, beautiful, beautiful relationships, such as we had in ancient times, as we did in Lemuria. I think that's one of the key examples, really. So that's a kind of lickety split, fast, high speed movement through the chart. Maybe one very final aspect I didn't pick up, but I'll talk about it. Just this quindicile, 165-degree aspect. You've got to use just a 2-degree orb between Mercury in Virgo and Neptune in Pisces. Mercury in Virgo wants to pin the facts down, get it right, get it exact. What's the truth? I need to know. Neptune saying, whoa, it's foggy, it's cloudy, maybe lots of deception there. You've actually got to tune into your intuition to get the truth.
Wow. So yeah, lots to backtrack through. So I've made some pretty copious notes as always, and I'm probably going to take them in reverse, Pam, if we can, because I think there's lots of amazing notes here, and I love the fact you've included so many of the KBOs and a couple of the asteroids too, because they're important. But I just want to share something that our friend Kelly Hunter, another astrologer who specializes in the KBOs and who are doing the Moons of Mythos show with, we were talking about this in relation to a piece that we just did for the Return of the Goddess, which is a journey that we're running currently on quantum plant healing. And she was suggesting that Pluto really is the gateway, you could say, to the rest of the KBOs. And so I think that that's an interesting idea to bring into the mix. And when we look at many of the KBOs, they have this quality of various goddesses, but also of death and rebirth and of a new way of doing things. And I think that Pluto really does symbolize the gateway to working with these KBO energies. And I think that that's a really important sort of container with which to put some of these newer astrological nuances into.
And David, astronomically, virtually all the KBO's orbits are beyond Pluto. So it's a literal astronomical gateway to the to space.
And also, I just want to bring in the work of Demetra George and her work on the asteroid goddesses. And the asteroids sit between Mars and Jupiter. And there is a theory that maybe one or more bigger flying objects, let's call them that, maybe not planets, exploded and created this wealth of asteroids, which carry the energy of the goddess. Now, this is very much in my awareness because it's the energy I'm working with at the moment. But I read somewhere that it was possible that one of those asteroids was called Ixchel, which is the Mayan goddess of fertility and the moon. And she then exploded or was exploded or crashed into many other pieces, of which we can even see. You've included Chaos there and Ceres. Those are two of the asteroids in the belt, but there are many others. And I actually sent Pam a chart ahead of today's show, just bringing in some of these different aspects of other goddesses like Isis and Sekhmet and Artemis and Parvati and Tara. And what was really interesting was that many of them are in very similar degrees, all in aspect to Pluto. And very much carrying the energy of the goddess, which is to do with death and rebirth and fertility and abundance, all of which is very 5D consciousness. Okay, so I would like to suggest that when heaven was ripped from earth, what we're actually talking about, because in my experience, 5D consciousness is really what we might call heaven. Unconditional love, the ability to see from a non-dual perspective. These are all things that we could consider to be heaven, but we've had such a distorted view of heaven given to us that it seems like some unobtainable place where only incredibly holy people get to pass through the pearly gates, and the big guy with the beard greets us and blah, 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 all the rest of it. I would suggest that that's just something that's been put as a blockage to us really understanding what is 5D. So when you included that piece there with Chaos, I was like, that's super interesting, because I feel that the energy of the goddess is really the energy of 5D thinking, 5D awareness, 5D being, which didn't leave our universe completely, or this didn't leave our planet rather completely, but was, you could say, scattered, fragmented, a bit like this possible big planet between Mars and Jupiter, and was shattered into many different forms of the goddess, which can be then tracked in individually through plants. There are certain plants like Santa Maria, which really takes you to 5D consciousness. But we can also see it in the astrology. So I just wanted to bring that in because as I've been studying with both you and Kelly for a while now through doing these shows, I'm understanding new and different things, which I think are very interesting. And the Salacia energy, yes, is very much about light, but it's also about water. And, you know, I'm sure many of your audience have already watched the wonderful interview you did with Randy, who we also did an interview with, and is going to be, we're going to be sharing that in the Return of the Goddess in a couple of days, which is kind of like an add-on talk to what you talked to Randy about. We went much more 5D, much more quantum, because the technology that he shared in that video really resonated strongly with me and Bella, because it's technology that we're already kind of working with at the energetic level, but in accordance with Mother Earth. Geomancy, as your friend Rory Duff will talk about a lot, is very much a big part of the ascension process. And I would like to suggest that getting the internal structure of our water clean and clear is essential if we want to receive these higher light codes from the universe, but mostly from our higher self. You know, we're talking about the blueprint of our life, our state of being that is coming, well, it's coming from us. But if we are living in a dirty container with dirty, polluted water, the message is going to come through either a bit like probably like your recent hard drive is going to come through a little bit, well, not working, or we're going to get mixed messages or something like that. So I think that water and light are super, super important. And I'm so glad that you brought those into this piece, because I think that we have to get our water clean, get our own water clean. And then with the likes of people like Randy's technology, we want to get the lakes, the rivers, the streams, the seas clean, because Mother Earth also wants her waters to be cleaned up. And, you know, one of the sad things I see time and again in Latin America is the completely dead, polluted water that runs through the cities. And I know in Britain we have an idea that we're better than all of that, but actually the truth is that I read somewhere that over 40% of UK rivers are dead and polluted. And, you know, if I think back to the stories that my granddad and even my father told me as kids, they were able to go and catch fresh fish, Pam, in the streams and rivers of Britain easily. And I don't think you can do that anymore. So I just wanted to start that as the entry point. What do you think in terms of the water and the light? How do you see that?
100%. And what was thrilling in that interview with Randy, and I'll be really excited to see the subsequent one you've done, is that, you know, rapidly in a quantum way, he is turning around the quality of water. I mean, one man who's developed this technology is doing so much to clean, you know, the Earth's water. I was thrilled, actually. I was ecstatic to hear that, because if you think about doing it the 3D way, it's going to take us forever, friggin' forever. But you know, he's doing it simply by using his energy and using his technology, and that is mega exciting. But that's quantum. That's where we're headed. That's 5D. Right. Fabulous.
And I think that's such a wonderful point, Pam, is that when we get to being in a 5D state of awareness more often, we don't have to spend years and years, oh, it never changes, it's always going to be like this. So that's a program, it's an absolute program we've been given, because at a quantum level, as I know from doing the healing work, when something is removed, it's removed. All it takes is for the person doing the work to be able to observe it and have confidence that it's removed. What stops it from happening is doubt, which is where the 4D aspect of ourselves, the emotional realms, can get programmed or triggered by messages, propaganda, narratives, etc., etc. So yeah, don't tune into those too much, because if you believe those, you'll stay very much in your 3D body, which actually is great for moving around in the suit, but it's not so great for downloading higher technology, which all of our higher selves have, you know. And I think that that's a really exciting piece that Sedna offers us. You know, so I was blessed enough to do a piece with Heather Ensworth, another friend of yours I know that you do shows with, for the Return of the Goddess. And we looked at 3 goddess asteroids or KBOs, and one of them was Sedna, which isn't actually either of those. It's a planet way out there, right, in the universe. But what I understand from Sedna, apart from all the things that you've shared before, is that Sedna is about letting go of the boat, right? It's also about letting go of the parents, letting go of everything that you knew that was in the boat, and letting yourself go into the collective consciousness of the water, which I think is very much about Saturn in Pisces, really. I think that the story of Sedna in many ways is kind of like Saturn in Pisces. And can you let go of the old paradigm? Can you let go of the patriarchal system? The one that gives you sometimes a roof over your head, food on the table, money, etc., etc., because it's easy? Or do you say, hey, no, I can do it by myself now? And actually, not only do I want to do it by myself, I want to do it in conjunction with many others who want to do it by themselves. So maybe if we all do it by ourselves, but together, we can be like Sedna at the bottom of the ocean. So I think
spot on, David, absolutely spot on. You are speaking the symbolism, you're speaking the astrology, because the father in astrology is Saturn. Saturn rules Capricorn. So in the myth, it was the father that chopped her fingers off. So that was absolutely the betrayal by the patriarchy, Saturn. But Saturn rules Capricorn, and this is where Pluto's been sitting. So again, there's another betrayal by the patriarchy, the system, because Capricorn in our 3D world is governments, corporations, institutions who have power over us. And the real, you know, there was a theme that I've talked about since January 2020, when we had that big important conjunction between Saturn and Pluto, because that set up something that historically has always been about the abuse of power. The abuse of power, Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn. And so all that you're talking about here is absolutely spot on for the astrology. And as Pluto moves increasingly into Aquarius, that's community, that's collaboration, that's soul tribe, that's like mind. So get together with those people and start to build a new world. 100%.
Wow. I really do believe that water is super important, Pam, and I know that we're both quite watery beings, so we kind of have an affinity with this energy, but it is really important because the water is polluted. And there again is that betrayal that you talked about, and you know, Sedna doing her little duck back into Taurus, I think is another chance to look at that and to start saying, hey, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to take 10, 20 years. I mean, the numbers and statistics that are given out about how and when the climate can be changed and what we have to do. I think that even in America now, they're trying to pass a bill that makes you have to limit how much beer you're drinking or something, because possibly that's going to affect the world's climate or something ridiculous like that. So I think that we can have a good time watching the news and laughing at some of the absurdity of it, because it is a bit of a comedy show, to be honest, and there's lots of really comedic characters all over the news these days, and I think that that's the best thing to do. We can treat it a bit like another version of the Simpsons show, which is also probably slightly funnier and better well written, to be honest. But anyway, so we've got this wonderful energy of Sedna here. What I think is also interesting, although you didn't allude to it, is how many planets are in retrograde at this equinox. Would you care to say a few words about that, Pam, how you see that?
Absolutely. Thank you, David. Jupiter today, in fact, has just moved into retrograde to join the party. And for the next few months, we are going to have a lot of planets, the majority of those outer planets in retrograde motion. And that's a big time of introspection, of deep dive, to go back over how we acted, what we believed, Jupiter, when we made decisions while those planets were direct, and a deep deep think about how well did that work?
Yeah.
Are those behaviors, actions, are we going to repeat those once the planets start to move direct again? Do we have the same belief system as we did earlier in the year when Jupiter was moving direct? Or is our belief system starting to be rattled severely by what is unfolding around us in the world? So retrogradation doesn't mean nothing will happen in the world. I mean, my goodness, it's going to be feverish activity at the 3D level. But individually, we on a deep, deep dive of who are we? What do we believe? What are our values? Taurus, what are our beliefs? And when we emerge from this retrograde cocoon, who are we going to be? How is it going to be different? What are we going to think? Who are the people we are going to associate with? What value system are we going to base our lives on that may change our lives very radically, particularly Pluto square the nodal axis?
Right, and we are recording this sometime ahead of the equinox at the beginning of September, and so we are in. Well, Venus has already gone stationary, ready to go forwards. I think in a few days, and I think this video is probably going to be released on the day of the Mercury Cazimi, and so we have lots of energies coming into this. But we've just gone through the Venus retrograde process, which I think really is interesting now that on the equinox, Venus and Mars are going to be an aspect to each other, because a lot of the Venus retrograde process, I think, this time round. Because when we kicked it off, it was being sandwiched. The Venus star point was being sandwiched by the true black moon and the mean black moon. So this whole Venus cycle is all about that energy of black moon Lilith. And, I'd like I shared already, we've been working with the energy of the goddess and calling her back much more with awareness and understanding how did she disappear? How did she become more subjugated? And where is she in all of our lives? And you said something super interesting, which I think is about becoming whole, and that Mars-Venus energy, both within relationships, but also within ourselves. How are we holding the masculine and feminine energies within us? Are we very external? Are we very yang? Are we getting up in people's faces? Or are we too much the other way? Are we too in, not connecting with people? And so I think that's a big part of the process for the end of this year, for the final stages of 2023, is where are we at in that process? Are we balanced human beings? Because if we're not, then it's going to be very difficult to be 5D and to be able to access that information, because there's going to be these kind of distortions that make us too inwards or too out, too yin, too yang. And so I think you referred to that somewhere. I can't remember. It was one of the, I think one of the KBOs about becoming more whole again. And
chaos. Right. So Libra, the balance. Yes. The balance, but also Black Moon Lilith, as you mentioned, David, and also Eris, very tightly conjunct the North Node right now. These are divine feminine entities who are all about sovereignty, all about sovereignty. Black Moon Lilith would be, the whole myth about would not submit to Adam in the Garden of Eden. Eris is all about being excluded from the wedding on Mount Olympus. Both stand in their sovereignty and will not relent. They are utterly uncompromising. They will fight to the end for sovereignty and truth and justice and a fairer society.
Right, which are probably all things I would guess that both me and you and all of our audiences would concur with. But how do we get to that place? And I think that that's the journey that we're on right now. And I think sometimes there's too much emphasis, even in the spiritual community, but also in the wider world, of looking outside of ourselves for somebody to provide us with the answer. And, the last 3 years have shown us really what can happen when you give your power away, particularly around your own health, to other individuals. And if you think about it from a logical point of view, it's kind of absurd for anyone else to know more about you and your health and your well-being than you do. And if you don't know that much about what's going on for you, I would suggest that's a really good place to start looking at how you're going to move forward into a state of sovereignty. Because if you're always looking to give your power away to somebody else so they can tell you more about you than you know about yourself, I would suggest that that's an illogical place to be. And it may be over the last couple of millennia we've been in that place and been encouraged to be like that. But I think that as we move forward with quantum health care, which particularly from my point of view comes through the plants, we have this incredible free healthcare service, which people like my wonderful friend and Web of Weird co-host Pete Jackson Main talk about. When we really engage with the plants at the quantum level, we understand that many plants have adaptogenic qualities, which really what we understand about those is that they're neuroimmunomodulators, which in a more easy to understand phrase means that they talk to us, not here, not the brain. They talk to us. And I say us deliberately because in this suit are many, many beings, not just David. David's probably just one of several million, because we have all of the organs, we have all of the blood, we have all the mitochondrial. And so in Chinese medicine, they understand that the liver has a spirit, the kidneys have a spirit. And actually, the more that we communicate with these and we go inwards and we start to become more at one with ourselves, with our energy systems, the more that we realize that we are just kind of the captain of a ship that needs care and attention. And really the best person to give that care and attention to us is actually us, right? So this is where the self-love comes in. How much do we love ourselves enough to take care of ourselves? And why are we taking care of other people more than we're taking care of ourselves? So we have a saying at Quantum Plant Healing, which is to be centered in self. I can be self-centered. I can be centered in myself. And when I am more than enough, actually. And in that place, then I'm able to go and help others. So I think this is some really important questions and motifs that have been coming up, certainly within our plant tribe over the last year. But I want to bring into the mix. And how do you see those playing out, Pam, over the next 3 months?
Oh, beautiful. Beautifully said. And it's crazy because this is referred to as alternative medicine, plant medicine. It's the original natural medicine. If you think aspirin comes from salicylic acid, the willow tree, and it's all been kind of patented, but it all comes from nature originally. All of our medicines originally from nature. So you're going back to, that the earth has all the ancient wisdom we need to heal us. And you have the incredible gift of actually being able to communicate with the plants. And it was incredible when you're talking about them as kind of neurotransmitters. I mean, just amazing how they can affect us and how they're adaptogen and how they can anticipate things coming up in our environment and in our bodies ahead of us. I mean, they are the evolved species that are leading us along with the animals, I'd suggest. We're the barbarians in this. We're lagging behind. And it's immensely exciting that we can go back to that kind of natural and organic route, which many of us are doing, because although we are all on more individual timelines than we have ever been, there are two broad collective timelines at the moment. One is very technological and synthetic. The other is absolutely natural, organic. And I know which one I'm headed out on. Absolutely. So, yeah, I think that's really beautifully said, and bring it on, I'd say, because the plants have such magic about them. There's even this thing which I'm sure you're aware of, David. It's said that if you spit on a seed when you plant it, the plant will produce whatever your body is lacking as well.
Right, that's so true.
Phenomenal.
And also there's the idea that the gut flora in our stomach is able to communicate with the microbiomes in our garden, which is what I believe, from a quantum perspective, gives us the idea of that the plants that we need, the medicines that we need, always grow within about a 20 meter radius of where we actually go to sleep. And I wondered about that magic for many years, and I came across a wonderful now past medicine man from South Africa who posited this idea. And actually also there's a tradition in the Amazon that when a maestro wants to pass, they call it the mariri, or the essence of the plants that he's died with, he spits, and then he gives that to his students, and then they absorb that, they take the spit on, and so within that is contained all of the energy or the essence or the spirit of the maestro's plant spirits that he has with him. So it's a way of exchanging or transmitting the information that quantum intelligence has. And again, we work a lot with essences, and currently working with Tulsi, which is another goddess plant from India, or is known from India, is connected to the spirit of Lakshmi. But Tulsi is another adaptogen and actually has the capacity to connect us to many different energies. But I just want to loop across the chart now that you prompted me to Ceres. Now, here Ceres, I think, is at 3 degrees of Scorpio and is now past Humea at 29 degrees of Scorpio, correct?
29 degrees of Libra, yep.
Sorry, 29 degrees of Libra, yes, he's about to go into Scorpio. But when we started the Return of the Goddess journey on the 30th of August, Ceres was actually the other side of Humea at 25, I think, of Libra, and in between was the South Node. And I thought this is really interesting how the node was being balanced by Ceres on the one hand, who's a goddess of fertility, of the grain, of corn, but also of what's in the earth, including the mycelium, the tree roots, and all of these wonderful things that can be exchanged energetically, but also through the the connectivity of the web of life, or the web of weird. And then on the other side of her, we had Humea, who was kind of like offering us this potential. Hey, look, here's the possibility of rebirth. What's also interesting is I looked up, there's actually an asteroid called Hawaii, which if you get a chance out there, anyone listening, you can pull up on one of those charts. It's very interesting to see where Hawaii's placement is right now. It's a story for another time, but very much linking to what's going on. But what I understood was that the islands of Hawaii have the potentiality to be a place of rebirth for the planet, which I think is super interesting considering what's been going on there right now, but also is very much connected to the ancient, more etheric, watery world of Lemuria or Mu, which may now be somewhere, on the return, we can say. But what I want to share about Ceres really is that Ceres, I think, offers the possibility, and again, I have to give a shout out to Demetra George, who contacted me in response to an email I sent her. And she said, I just want to point to the fact that there are carvings going back to the Eleusinian mysteries of Ceres and Persephone, carrying the ergots of corn, which has the sort of the fungi, which actually gave rise to the modern form of LSD, but also that they were carrying the sacred fungi, which actually is a way to access the astral realms and to start dealing with our emotions in a much more expanded state of consciousness. So I was like, that's really interesting. So she's showing us, pointing to what's in the earth so that we can understand and absorb the whole process of life and death and the need to compost and break down, which is really what the medicine of the sacred fungi is breaking down the sense of self, removing the masks, removing the facades, the identities that we've had to wear or to put on, or that we've just absorbed so that we fit in with our friends, our family, our work, our society. But when we remove those masks, as we were doing on one of our journeys earlier this year, the Quest of the Quantum Heart, many of us realize without those masks, particularly the one of victimhood, or if I remove all of the faces I wear that are attached to my wounding, and I don't have any wounding anymore, then who the hell am I? And I sat with this process myself deeply, and I was like, oh my God, that's kind of disturbing to see how much of my persona is being worn through the wounding I've received in life. And having Chiron at 29 degrees of Aries is a lifelong challenge. So I kind of had that one quite deep. But I just want to share this because everything you've suggested to me and what Ceres is pointing to is, are you ready for an expanded state of consciousness? Have you broken down your sense of self? Have you removed all of the masks so that when Humea kicks in with the death and rebirth process, which she's balancing now at the 29th degree of Libra before she goes back into Scorpio, it's like she said, hey, we're going to have a little taste of this, but oh, you're not quite ready. You need to go back and have another little look at what's going on here so that when we move forwards, we're ready to really go with this energy. And I think that that is perhaps some of what this retrograde process is, and even particularly Venus that we've just finished with is showing us. It's like, well, you think you're ready to go, but are you ready to go? Have you cleaned your waters? Is your vessel, your sacred vessel, really, is it carrying that inner light of purity that Vesta shows us? And or has the flame gone out, actually? We can also look at it from that perspective. So I think there's lots of really exciting ideas in here that we can play with a little bit, but I do concur that the breaking down of self, the letting go of the boat, the absorption into a much bigger state of consciousness is not something that we should be afraid of, but understand is a natural part of our expansion into higher realms of consciousness.
Yeah, beautifully said, David. And also, if we look at this square, which is quite ongoing between Venus and Jupiter, and I've often said, if you can't think of anything else, welcome in an expanded consciousness of love. Right. Jupiter is expanded consciousness, Venus is obviously love. And so that's where we have to be. And, people like you, David, are living in the magic zone 24/7. You're living in the magic zone. Randy Hatton is living in the magic zone. An increasing number of us are living in the magic zone, and we are certainly not in the majority yet. We're very much in the minority, but nevertheless, because high frequency energy will always have a greater effect over lower than the other way around, we are changing the quantum wave structure. So the more you can stay in love, joy, compassion, gratitude, positivity, you, with every thought, with every feeling you have through your days, you're creating your future, for better or worse. So be aware of that kind of energetic responsibility, because these times are crucial. We're in the crucible of change. These times are crucial. They're transformational. It has never, your choices, your state of being, they have never been more important than they are right now. So almost be, I don't want to say a thought policeman so much, because that sounds a little bit controlling, but be very conscious and wise and aware of your state of being through your days. And if you just think, well, I'm just, a housewife at home on my own, great. You're in control of your state of being through the day, particularly if you're on your own. So really encourage people to do that, because I think at this Libra equinox, like, the solstices and equinoxes in general, but perhaps this one in particular, and possibly even bigger as we get towards the Capricorn solstice, they're going to be huge waves of high frequency energy, huge waves of light coming in. Now, there may be attempts to block that, who knows? But nevertheless, you focus on the light, you focus on high frequency, because that's all that matters, and kind of have, your spiritual blinkers on to say, no, this is my timeline. This is the way I'm going. And that's what I'm focused on.
Absolutely beautiful, Pam. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And also, at these equinoxes, the balance between light and day is balanced. It's perfect, right? But after that, we then head down into the darkness for the period up until winter solstice. Many people are afraid of the dark, but if we've done our homework and looked into the shadows of our energy field, then when we go into the darkness, what we're really doing is going into the womb space. We're going into the void. Another wonderful medicine, again, the sacred fungi helps us with that, because it's about breaking down and going into the void and not being scared of the dark. Being Scorpio, the dark is our friend. But for many other people, they're afraid of the dark. But why would you be afraid unless there's something in the shadows of the dark that you don't want to confront? And we need to illuminate our shadows so that when we do go into the void, into the womb space, we're in a nice, clean, clear vessel where there's no contamination, no distortion, no misalignment, so that we can absolutely channel perfectly the blueprint that our higher selves hold for each and every one of us, because that is why we're here, to experience that much more expanded state of consciousness, but in a embodied 3D sense. So I think that's wonderful. And one final thought from the chart I wanted to illuminate was that Mars and Venus are obviously in aspect to Chiron, right? So I think that, again, is showing that need to balance the masculine and feminine energies.
Absolutely, because Venus is trine to Chiron and it's in sextile to Mars, and Mars is opposing Chiron. Yep. So they're in very, very tight aspects. So yeah, that's the whole male, divine feminine and masculine side too. So very important period that we're going through. I think these equinoxes and solstices really feel more and more pivotal as we go through. And we just keep on riding those waves to get to a better state of being. It's never been more important than now.
Right, so we are moving into the latter point of the year. We do have Scorpio season ahead with that wonderful full moon eclipse, which is on my birthday this year. So I'm kind of looking forward to how that one's going to play out.
Just got lucky, eh? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I have to smile inwardly sometimes at my higher self's jokes that he plays with me through my astrology. But what I think is really important, that we keep a sense of humor, that we can laugh at ourselves, we can laugh at what our higher selves have laid on for us, because in the end, it's all part of the story. It's all part of the play at the theatre. Hopefully the one that we've been watching at that crumbling theatre now is really coming to the end of its run, and we're going to a much more kind of futuristic, possibly water-powered sort of cinema, where we can see a whole different vista that is coming towards us very, very quickly. But we have to choose it. There is no God-given right to experience these things. It's down to us. Nobody's going to do it for us. And I think that that's also really important to take into these last few months, is that there is not necessarily a savior coming riding on a white horse. And if there is, it's us doing it for us. And I think that, as you always say, Pam, it's so important to bring that back to ourselves. But maybe as we come to the final concluding remarks for this whirlwind show, maybe that's the energy you've been talking about, the compression of time. We can just conclude our thoughts together and wrap things up.
Yeah, absolutely. You self-select your timeline by your frequency. Nobody forces you onto that. Nobody chooses it for you. Self-select by your frequency. And just to really reiterate that the distance we have come energetically in terms of frequency, and I think we're not that aware of it, because we just look at the chaos outside and we think, oh yeah, have we done very well as humanity? We have done phenomenally well. We are ahead of expectation of where we were expected to be at this time. We're about a 25% or more ahead energetically in frequency of where we were expected to be, and humanity has done that. You, me, all of us watching this, we have done that by our individual efforts. So pat yourself on the back and feel proud. We often don't take the time to look back down the mountain and pat ourselves on the back, but let's keep on trucking to the summit.
Okay, so let's take this chart down, Pam, if you can, on
Yep.
your end, and we'll just kind of wrap up. Yeah, it's we're often told that we shouldn't be too egotistical or congratulate ourselves, but I think what you've said is really important, and I can only speak for myself in this regard, but I'm not the same person I was 2 months ago. I'm not the same person I was 12 months ago, and I'm definitely not the same person that first met you a few years ago. And, I think that when we step into the place of trust, we step into the place of the energy of the goddess. She wants everything to be good for us, but she also wants to be in a clean vessel. And why not? Why should an energy like that want to come into a dirty vessel? And I think I just want to point people who may be new to watching some of these videos, please do look at some of the immersions we've done on quantum plant healing. A whole trajectory of plant immersions was laid out, starting with the plant that makes us the most present, which is our good old friend dandelion, who's very much connected to the royal noble heart of the lions. And we are working with the energy of the goddess at the moment, but we've had some amazing journeys working with the Journey to the Rainbow Bridge, and also quite a few other amazing plants too. So please do check that out, everybody. We're giving the site a little bit of a revamp right now, and there's a nice, easy to flow chart there. But what would be your final wrap up thoughts, Pam, as we head into this final section of the year, and how do you recommend to people they can get in touch with their quantum selves?
Yeah, I would just again say be absolutely rigorous in catching your post-it notes all over the house. What's your frequency? What are you thinking about? Stay in love, stay in joy, stay in gratitude, stay in compassion, stay in peace. So literally stick post-it notes on your fridge, your kitchen cupboards, your bathroom mirror. What's your state of being? What are you thinking about? And if you're going into doom and gloom, flick it. I'm welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love. And do anything. Look at a blue sky, listen to birdsong, stare into a flower. Simple, simple, simple stuff. Hug a pet, hug a child, hug a tree. Simple to flick you quickly into a better state of being. And I know I bang on about these things a lot, but they work for me. This is the kind of stuff I do day to day. They work for me.
Right, beautiful. Thank you for saying all of that, Pam. And again, I think we always share from the place of our own direct experiences, and each and every one of us has to find what works for us. But I know that we both definitely suggest the idea of being in nature, being under a tree, and all of those wonderful things. And also, again, everybody, please do check out what is the level and quality of the water you're putting into yourself. If you're telling yourself that the tap water you're drinking is really, really good for you, I would question that there is any really good tap water anywhere in the world. Definitely look into how to purify your water, because you want to put good stuff into yourself. And if you're putting lots of junk into your body, I'd have to ask why, really, for the same reason we should be asking why about many things. Why am I giving my power away, etc., etc. So, look, thank you again, Pam. Such a wonderful chat. Always love doing these. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your heart and all of your enthusiasm for the New Earth process. Thank you, everybody, for checking in today and listening to this wonderful preview for the Libra equinox that is coming up on the 23rd of September. And most of all, everybody, stay in your hearts, connect to yourself, because when you're in your hearts, you're really connected to your higher self. And that is the energy of 5D, the goddess, fertility, abundance, and unconditional love. So keep it real, keep it empty. We'll see you all again very soon.
Lots of love, everyone. Bye for now.